Greetings, glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace to people of good will. In this video, I want to ever so briefly discuss the Hebrew words Talmud and Talmid. Now, I understand that if I keep pronouncing the word that's typically pronounced Talmud as Talmud, it's going to drive people crazy, but I hope you'll forgive me. I'm going to pronounce it Talmud rather than Talmud here to emphasize the difference between these two words, between Talmud and Talmid. And really quickly, I previously discussed the structure of both these words in my video on verbal noun structures in Semitic languages, which I'll link to in the description. But I wanted to very, very briefly revisit the subject here. These are two closely related words, though as is reflected even in their transliterations or their pronunciations, and I just mentioned the pronunciation, as is reflected in those transliterations and pronunciations, there's a slight spelling difference between them, and it's a difference of a single letter within the materlecciones of each one, that being a wa in the word Talmud, where the word Talmid has instead a yod, and I've marked that difference in red on your screen. Now, color-coding the rest of each word, I'll mark the common root in blue, and I'll use green to mark the tau prefix, which turns these into sorts of verbal nouns. Now, that root, which is marked in blue, is the base here. The lamed mem dalet root gives rise to verbs meaning to learn or to study, so we might describe the word Talmud as meaning lesson, and Talmid as one who is learning that lesson or a lesson. Or we might describe the word Talmud as meaning study, while Talmid would mean student, one who studies. In short, Talmud is an object of learning or an object of study, while Talmid is an individual who engages in learning or study. And I wanted to make a quick video noting such after seeing a live which aired on the We Woke Now channel last Saturday night into the wee hours of Sunday morning, at least for those of us on the East Coast of the United States. As towards the end of that live, the host, Kelly Richardson, started having some technical difficulties, at which point he ended the live. But while he was noting those difficulties and also making note of his decision to end the show, his screen displayed a few interesting slides which he had intended to include in his presentation that evening, apparently. And those slides are relevant to the topic of this video. So we're going to pick this up at the 1 hour, 44 minute, 22 second mark. And the excerpt that we're going to play will run for slightly under a minute and a half. And then we'll look at, like 3 of the slides that he shows in this excerpt. All right, but here it is, fair use.
This is according to their sources here. Notice what this says here. Name of 2 works which have been preserved in posterity as the product of the Palestinian Babylonian schools during the Amoraic period, which extended from the 3rd to the 5th century. So it's telling us between the 3rd, 5th century, this is well after Christ, well after the disciples, well after Israel got invaded, right? We see that between the 3rd and 5th century, this is not ancient technically. So it says from the 3rd to the 5th century is when this Talmud was written. Goes on to say Talmud Babli, but it frequently serves as a generic designation for the entire body of literature. So this is giving you more information on it. So we already know that the Talmud deal with pedophilia. We already know that. We already taught that. So let me see here. What else do I want to cover here? I don't know why this is doing this. Bear with me 1 second, family. May have to call it a wrap because I'm having some issues with here.
Okay, so having seen that, I want to take a look at the slides he had on the screen. First, he showed this entry on the Talmud from the 1906 Jewish Encyclopedia, and I'll provide a link in the video description for anyone who wants to see the full entry. And I want to note how the word Talmud is spelled here, so I'm highlighting the wa to emphasize that. And I mention that because when Kelly reproduced that text in his slide, he had a typo. He had a yod where he should have had a wa. Now, to be clear, in a vacuum, that's no big deal, right? We are all at risk of having typos in our videos. I myself certainly have had typos in a bunch of my own past videos, and I probably am going to have typos in future videos. So a typo in a vacuum is not the issue, right? It's not egregious. It's fine. But I wanted to point that out because in a subsequent slide, it was clear that he wanted to show the word Talmud in the Bible, in specifically 1 Chronicles 25:8, but he seems to have arrived at that verse by doing a search for the word Talmid instead, with the yod, not the word Talmud with the wa. In other words, his own typo seems to have influenced his subsequent word search, right? His keyword search using some sort of Bible search software or something like that. And it seems he unwittingly was treating a verse that did not have the word Talmud as including it. Now, before we get to Kelly's next slide, I wanted to look that verse up in this cool little Hebrew Bible that I have. And as some of you might notice from the title, this volume is not merely the Tanakh. Rather, there's a fourth section included. I'm not sure if we should come up with a new acronym for this volume, like Tanakab or Tanakabach or something. But jokes aside, let's open this book up and turn to the relevant verse. And as we flip through this work, you can see it's entirely in Hebrew. And here we are at Divrei Hayamim Aleph, or First Chronicles, and we're going to look at the 25th chapter and the 8th verse. And this is the verse we want to focus on. This is the verse that Kelly himself referenced. And in this chapter, lots are being cast to determine where performers of music in the temple will fall. And the text said that this applied kekaton, kegadol, as little as great, or perhaps more eloquently put, as it was with the young, so too it was with the older men, or more experienced men, elders, I don't know. Then immediately after that, the verse offers another contrast. Mebin im talmid, literally one who understands with one who is learning, or more eloquently put, teacher and student alike. Now, putting aside the preposition in the middle, that word im, I want to focus on the first word and the third word, mebin and talmid. And the reason why is because in a subsequent slide, Kelly put up the King James Version's English translation of the verse, and then with a few choice placings of like Hebrew letters, he alluded to those specific Hebrew words, mebin and talmid. Now, he noted the word talmid again with a yod, not the word Talmud with a wa, and aside from that, he also referenced beit yod nun. He left out the mem in the word mebin, the first letter, but I'll add it here in light gray. But this raises a question. Why did he leave it out? Honestly, me personally, I think this is a sign that he's beholden to Strong's Concordance, right? That arguably he's at the mercy of Strong's Concordance. You see, that beit yod nun is the root of the word mebin. In other words, he reduced the word mebin to just its root. However, talmid has not been reduced to its root, which, as we noted earlier, would be lamed mem dalet, or LMD, if you wish. It would seem that Kelly reduced one to its root, but not the other to its root, precisely because that's how one finds these words in those, online websites which use Strong's Concordance, like, I don't know, Bible Hub or Blue Letter Bible or whatever. Now, there could be reasons for this. For example, mebin is a participle, and these online sites treat participles as verbs, and, they can and do function as verbs in the present tense. But in this context, it seems to me that the participle is clearly being used like a noun. Whatever the case, the question needs to be asked, in what sense might Kelly consider it helpful to reduce the word to just its root, assuming he did it consciously? That root is put into several different verb stems in the text of the Hebrew Bible. Not that I've ever seen Kelly or any other proponent of Lashon Kodash discuss the different verb stems. But whatever the case, I honestly think that he reduced it to just the root because that's how it's listed in Strong's Concordance, as well as on popular websites which use Strong's Concordance. But unfortunately, we can't be certain because Kelly was suffering technical difficulties and had to cut his live short. He didn't, and because of that, he didn't get around to elaborating on what he intended to argue from those slides. Perhaps he'll get back to it soon, who knows. But suffice to say, that's not the word Talmud there, though it is a related word, Talmid. And by the way, in the King James, as you'll notice in this translation, it says scholar, but as I mentioned in my previous video on verbal noun structures in Semitic languages, scholar here is more along the sense of the German word Schüler, where it literally means schooler, one who's, undergoing schooling, a student, right? And with that, I'll close this video here. Perhaps it could be a sort of first step towards more conversation on Talmud and Talmid. I don't know. Who knows? But either way, as always, I welcome any comments, questions, or criticisms. And you see, unlike the We Woke Now channel, I don't censor comments here. So feel free to share your thoughts, whether positive or negative. And God bless.